I'm giving you that insight because there's a big historical event involved in this very room where you're sitting. At one point of time, the Muslim League had its conference here, and their sole spokesperson at that time, a gentleman called Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was giving a lecture, and there was an assassination attempt made in this very room. So this room has history. And we are also going to talk about something that is going to make the history of the future. Television broadcasting in our country, and news broadcasting specifically, has had its very good days. A time has come, a lot of people who were watching television realized that newsrooms and news networks had lost what they called classical television. What became television as we watched it every day, and I've participated in several of those programs, were reduced sometimes to slanging matches, to really loud anchors, to a lot of emotion and outbursts. And some of the people who were very popular on television, for various reasons as their careers progressed, moved from that kind of classical television or news television to a new form of television or new form of digital media called YouTube. We are here to discuss whether the 500 million people who subscribe to YouTube in India, and it's a fairly large number, it's more than the population of the United States of America, are watching it because they still believe that they will get the truth on YouTube vis-a-vis television as it was or as it is? Or is YouTube TV network a vanity project, a post-retirement job? We have brilliant people this afternoon, and I'll start with Ms. Sharma to give us her views on what she thinks. She's writing a book, incidentally, on exactly the same thing. So she will be able to give us a good insight into what's happening with the people who are on YouTube and the value of YouTube and the credibility of YouTube. Ma'am.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. And just to share my journey, I've been a journalist for more than 20 years. And currently, as he mentioned, I'm writing a book on the changing face of Indian media. All the speakers that you heard, they were my former, in fact, Vikram was my former boss. He was the CEO of NDTV Profit when I was with NDTV Profit. And I have heard perspectives from all of them. I've spoken to all of them, including, of course, Dr. Anurag Batra, Mr. Shekhar Kapoor, Mr. Vikram Chandra, and so many more. Basically, all the star anchors of our country, so to say. I've spoken to all of them, and the view that emerges is that the challenges in YouTube are the same as the challenges in television. It is about credibility, it is about authenticity, and YouTube could be a narcissistic, self-promotional narrative, which does happen sometimes with a lot of anchors, especially the star anchors. At the same time, it could be an unbiased, genuine journalism where they're touching upon topics which haven't been touched upon by the mainstream media. They do have a wider reach. So to answer your question, it's about impact versus influence. It's about engagement versus bias. It's about authenticity and credibility versus clicks and revenue. So just to sum up, I would say that profit and content, they cannot go hand in hand. At the end of the day, the revenue models have to be looked into, whether it is YouTube, whether it is mainstream media. Content cannot chase revenue. So the minute you need to separate content, because at the end of the day, whether it's a TV channel or whether it's a YouTube star or an influencer, they're all trying to get some form of revenue. So if you want authentic journalism, where facts are just narrated without a verdict being passed, and where a journalist is not pro-government or anti-government, or not pro a certain business house and anti a certain business house, if you want honest, unbiased facts, you have to separate the revenue model. So that is my take on it, that, I mean, as per the topic, it can be self-promotional, it can be impactful. It's not about the medium, it is more about the revenue model, which has to change.
Mr. Kaul, do you believe that making money is not possible if you are credible?
Well, firstly, thank you to Anurag ji and the entire team of Exchange for Media for having me here. And a very interesting topic. When I look back, really, I started my career back almost 16 years ago. And even before that, during my college days, I was into activism. And back then, it was an accidental, move towards activism. And there was a website called petitiononline.com where I actually wrote a petition, and that became my claim to fame, and the rest is history. But the point here is that YouTube in itself, the topic that we are discussing today, is a creator's paradise. It is something that we spoke about perhaps a decade ago, is citizen journalism. Whether it is impactful or not, whether it is linked to revenue or not, is something that we are debating today. In my humble opinion, I think everything is derived, particularly for the news channels and news broadcasters, from the revenue model. So I completely agree with what Ms. Sharma really said. But at the same time, we have to segregate a business model from a creator's model. Of course, revenue is the final end game for the creators and for the news broadcasters as well. And at the same time, the word biased that we use quite often, I don't think there is anything unbiased. Everything is biased. If somebody in the news medium is telling you that we are not biased, we are the most authentic and unbiased platform or journalist, they are lying to you. I think overtly or covertly, the bias does stem in. Of course, in the last many years, it's obvious on which side a particular journalist or a channel is swinging. Earlier, they used to act smart. I would just be very honest about the Indian media platforms, at least. I'm not going to the US, which is quite similar. I often hear this, that, the Indian media is almost, especially the TV media, is a fish market. But it's quite similar in the US as well. I think we are at a very nascent stage. We are still learning the games. And I work at an OTT platform presently, and I've worked mostly in my career for various top news channels, including Times Now, Republic, and others. So at this moment, we have to realize that YouTube is not just the biggest visual medium, it's also one of the biggest search engines. In India, there are staggering figures that come out if you really go in deep into it. An average consumer consumes at least 7 hours of internet every day. And out of that, 30 minutes to an hour is on YouTube. So certainly it is a creator's paradise. I was thinking that every influencer who is on Twitter, on Instagram, or Facebook, finally is also on YouTube, and perhaps has an embedded link that goes to YouTube. So I think YouTube is something that certainly cannot be ignored in the creative field for broadcasters or for the creators, and particularly for the business news channels and news channels. I think it's a big revenue model, big business model to get money, to get viewership, because TV in the traditional form has its roadblocks. TV in its form has a certain kind of audience, particularly the English medium where I work. There's only a particular age gap or a particular area that you actually cater to. YouTube has an entire audience and an entire world out there where you can reach. So I think this debate of a vanity project or impactful journalism will continue forever. I think we are unfortunately moving away from the traditional impactful journalism, although perhaps some journalists will have that fire within them, but the corporate structures, the business models, and the revenue needs certainly changes the prerogative and the demand. And at the same time, yes, unfortunately, some of the projects are vanity projects and will remain so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaul. Mr. Khan, Awaz the voice.
Yes.
What's your subscription, and how do you see YouTube as an option for saying exactly what you want to say to the world?
Well, I want to tell you about my experience. Let me just give a brief about my background. I've had the privilege of working with print, television, and digital, all three mediums. So I'll be doing almost 3 decades of journalism very soon. So, and when I see the present state of affairs in journalism, I'm concerned like all others. And that's why when I moved on to the digital platform, which is Awaz the Voice, we took a decision, a policy decision that we are not going to do any polarized content. We will be doing inclusive content rather than doing polarizing content. So first 2 years were pretty difficult, and we are now running in the 4th year. But after the second year, because first 2 years we were all struggling and we were worried whether this kind of content is going to work or not. But after 2 years, it started looking up, and we started getting more and more views. So we took a decision not to do the kind of content which is happening elsewhere. But I want to give you my take on what I feel, what I've been thinking about the larger questions which we are confronted with, as far as journalism today is concerned. You see, these, and I assume that when we talk about Vanity, we are talking about individual journalists who moved away from the conventional journalism, they're doing their own thing. Many of them are our friends, they're colleagues, and some of them spoke today also. And if you look at where they're coming from, they are essentially very, very people with strong ideas, who are very confident, fiercely independent, and they want to do something on their own. Some of them were underrated journalists. They were pretty good at their job. They were great storytellers, but they did not get an opportunity. But with the advent of social media and YouTube especially, now there's endless opportunity. And they don't have to worry for their salaries. They don't have to worry for the editorial policies. They don't have to worry for the style sheets.
Censorship?
Yeah, censorship, of course. You see, I believe that we operate under freedom of speech, which our constitution guarantees. But our constitution also has a rider to it, which is public order. So what is happening is that the old school of journalism, which Barkha was talking about, the legacy journalism, I partly agree with her, and I partly agree with what Bhupender was saying. Bhupender was saying that this is not the end, this is not the graveyard. We are not standing in the graveyard of journalism. I agree with him, on that stand. But as far as Barkha is concerned, that we are, the old school of journalism need to unlearn. I agree with her on that take. So what I'm trying to say is that we are going through a lot of revolution. World, it's not just in India, everywhere in the world. And what is happening is that the old school of journalism is questioning. People who've been there for 30 years, 40 years, they're questioning themselves that if we are there, they're not present on the YouTubes, they're not getting the numbers, are they not good journalists? So what we need to unlearn and what we need to understand is the changes which are happening, the evolution which is happening in the entire, not just the journalism is a part of the entire society, the civilizations. So what is happening is that there are three. I will try to explain my point in 5 C's. Since everybody's been talking about C's today, one is the competition which is happening in the conventional media, which is news channels and all, the choice which the social media brings, and the confusion which is happening around us, all around us. So people are looking for. People are wondering where do they go for credible information. So what is happening is that this confusion is happening essentially because of the global churning, the order, the changes in the economy, and the traditional societies are collapsing. So people are feeling lost, they're feeling left out. The children are challenging the traditions they've been following. So, a Muslim man would be wondering why his son is not wearing a skull cap while offering prayers. Why is he shaved off his beard and he's going to, his office? Similarly, a Hindu man will say that why is my son, he doesn't even touch the egg, he suddenly started eating chicken. What is happening? There's something wrong around my culture. People are questioning the cherished notions which were there. So what is happening essentially is that people are clinging on to their own identities. They're trying to, they're closing instead of opening up. They find comfort in their own communities. So what has happened is this has given rise to these YouTube channels which are riding on the, essentially on the wave of politicization, the polarization, which is essentially political. They are not doing, you'll see that all the popular YouTube news channels are not sports, they are not investigative journalism, they are not health, they are not environment, they are essentially political. So what is happening is that they are riding on the political, sort of wave. And see, there's no harm in criticizing government. There's no harm in criticizing political parties. There's no harm in even criticizing court judgments. As journalists, you're supposed to do it. But what happens, the problem arises when the YouTube channels, the news channels, they are working as per certain agenda. And what happens is when they start getting popular, they're creating an identity for themselves. And then they start liking that identity. And that's when the vanity comes. I'm not saying that all YouTube news channels, the people who are running it, they have vanity. Some of them are very genuine. They believe in, they have the conviction, they have dedication, and they are self-motivating. So let's not take it away from them. Right. So what I basically want to say is that the confusion which we are surrounded with is giving rise to polarization, and this is going on and on. We as journalists today, what we need to do is give them solutions. Give them solutions, give them reassurance, give them security, which is worrying them as far as their identity is concerned.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Khan. That was a fairly long and winding monologue, but we learned a lot. Professor Martel, Frederic, comment ça va? You are next. Are we the sea of confusion in Europe also? How do you view Indian broadcasting and YouTube industry, the search for truth in YouTube, in the largest democracy, not only in the world, in the history of the world?
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Thanks for having me. I wouldn't discuss how we see India from Europe or from France, since I'm sorry to say it's not probably the main topic we have in our countries. At the same time, I will just mention a few points that show both how optimistic we can be and also pessimistic we can be. And so as Radip Sardesai said this morning, and by the way, I love his introduction, keynote, it's both good news and bad news, and especially also on YouTube. The question is vanity project or impactful journalism? The answer, of course, is both. YouTube is everything. YouTube is vanity project, is impactful journalism, is entertainment, is serious journalism, is a place where you can cook, place you can love. It's also place where you find terrorism. It's everything. And I would say that the main problem is that we are not in front of a media. We are not in front of one TV. We are in front of every media and every TV. And we don't have to forget, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, that it's not just YouTube. It is part of Alphabet, which means part of Google. So it's an international American big company. I don't have anything against Americans, but it's a specific place owned by a specific corporation in a specific country. Not exactly since the beginning, which was, I think, 2005, when Google was created and then bought for more than $1 billion by Google. And they are based in San Bruno, I think, which is a city in the Silicon Valley in California. At the same time, and that's the good news, YouTube is American, but is also in 80 languages. It is both free and also you can pay. There is now the YouTube Red that became YouTube Premium that makes that allow you to see videos without publicity and to give you more money to the content. And that's also a very good place where you can do and have an economic models, and especially for underdogs, as it has been mentioned. So that's pretty good, even though don't forget that the underdog, even though when he's very famous on YouTube, get not a lot of money in comparison with what Google and YouTube own themselves. In addition of that, if you compare in the music side, YouTube to Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, and many others, Cobuzz, and so on, YouTube is the only one that gives as less money as the other one. So they don't pay content well. And by the way, that's something I still don't understand. When you're so powerful, when you have so much money, why you don't pay content, music content, but also the so-called underdog and everybody that puts a video on YouTube. Then another bad side. I'm following a lot of people on YouTube. I'm following the extraordinary and wonderful interview by Salman Tour. You might not know this guy. He's a young artist from Pakistan, but he was also here in New Delhi, where he had a very nice show. He's very young, and what he does is absolutely wonderful in terms of art. But I'm also following on YouTube somebody like Kemi Seba, who is a pure propagandist, 100% fake news from Africa. I also follow a guy named Richard Medhurst. He's supposed to be a British nice journalist, but actually he's paid by Iran, and that's pretty well known because he worked for Al Mayadin, which is an Iranian TV, to give fake news all day long to millions of people. So they are extremely popular, but they are also extremely biased, and they are not just biased because they have different opinions, which at the end can be okay, but they are biased because they are paid by, I would say, to be friendly, authoritarian regime to make propaganda. The last point of this very quick introduction, it's more positive and more optimistic. I do believe that even though YouTube can be a very bad tool for very bad people, it can also be a new way of having relation with others. And I do think that here in India, but also maybe let's say in Delhi, the goal is not necessarily to speak on YouTube to be able to become famous worldwide. It is also very important to be heard here. And I do think that the internet in general and YouTube in particular are not just global tools. They are also local tools. On YouTube, there is a lot of borders, even though it's free and borders doesn't exist. The borders are, first of all, the territory where you live. Second of all, the language you speak. It's not the same if you speak in Hindi or in English or in one of the dozens and hundreds languages you speak in India. The border is also the culture, the sphere of culture you are part of. And it's also, maybe even more important, this mix of territory, language, and culture you are part of. So the good news to finish is that you can exist with your own values, your own local content, your own community-based, local-based. That also is important, not only to be famous everywhere in the world. And to finish, I would say that a lot of people like me, the old kind of journalist, for a long time when we were, stopping to work as a journalist, we became blogger. Now, the same journalists are becoming YouTuber, and have their own channels, or sometimes booktuber, which is a book critic on YouTube. So at the end, there is a lot of bad things on YouTube, but that's also a good news.
Merci beaucoup. Très bien. Ms. Sharma, I know you were raring to go. So
I'm used to
we are
television.
running a little,
I'm used to television,
over.
so everything is
Yeah,
shorter
yeah,
at
yeah.
this work. So these are quite
we are
long
running
formats.
a little, low on time. But I'll ask you a question, and then before we end, I'd like to know: are you all going to be famous YouTubers? Are you going to follow somebody who's very famous as a YouTuber? But you can ask you can say what you want to say.
So I would just like to steer us back to the topic where I feel that there are advantages and disadvantages of YouTube. And first of all, we have to distinguish content creators from journalists. Everyone who is a content creator is not a journalist. So that's the
What
first
is a
thing.
journalist?
So journalism is a profession. Not everybody who knows medicine can be a doctor. Not everybody who knows science can be a scientist. So the same way, not everybody with a phone and a camera and journalism is something you have to learn. There is a system in place, there are checks in place, and that is the benefit of legacy media, that there are processes in place. Again, I'm not saying that YouTubers or YouTube journalists cannot do justice. We have Rajdeep, we have Barkha, we have Ravish, we have so many who are doing a great job and they have great followers. But what I'm trying to say is that there needs to be, we need to look at advantages and disadvantages. So while there are low entry barriers, while there is diversification of content, while there is innovative storytelling formats, which are the benefits of YouTube, there is also disadvantages where there are not enough checks, there is lack of authenticity. Again, like TV channels, you need to watch 5 YouTube channels to get the real view. Just like you need to scour through 5 channels. Most people right now, if you ask them, nobody listens to one TV channel. They look at one and the other and the other, and then they form their own opinion. So where is the credibility? That's what my question is.
So you're asking me where's the credibility?
Yeah.
Mr. Kaul, you are in the television business, and
No,
do
I'm
you
saying
think
that
do you think
credibility is getting compromised either way. Their checks need to be in place. That's what I'm saying.
do you think YouTube should be censored, controlled, and you almost sound like a government officer. I'm sorry to say that, but
Well, I don't think that you could censor YouTube. Of course, there are some pros and cons. Of course, Arthur mentioned it briefly, which is about disinformation and misinformation that happens so frequently on YouTube and any social media platform for that matter. And we've seen that happening. We've seen the INB ministry also blocking some of the YouTube content, particularly from Pakistan or China. A lot of these efforts are made. But I would slightly disagree with my co-panelist, which is that I don't think that journalism could be learned. I think journalism is something that comes from within you. I went to a journalism school, and while I don't regret it, in my speech while receiving the award, I said that I don't think journalism can be taught. It can be chiseled and here and there, but it comes from something within you. There has to be a passion, there has to be a conviction of courage, there has to be a zeal within you that makes you a journalist. And at the same time, I would leave you on a very positive note briefly because we don't have time. And this is that, how much we've grown over the last 10 to 15 years. I remember back in 2006 when I was in college, and I started this campaign on Priyadarshini Mattu. And at that time, of course, we didn't know what to do. I was not a traditional activist who knew, what all needs to be done. And what I did at that time was, reach out to NDTV. And Sonia is sitting here. I saw her after many years. And NDTV was of great, immense help. We together launched this campaign for justice for Priyadarshini Mattu after a decade. And the justice delivery mechanism and system had to move within days. And today, when I look back, we have YouTube, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, and a common person can raise questions. If you term a particular media as biased, he doesn't have to care about it. He can ask questions, he can make his own videos and question the system. That's how far we have come, and we are only growing. Of course, there are elements who will create trouble, and we'll have ways to deal with it. But I think impactful journalism continues to be there. You just need to have that conviction within you. But unfortunately for the news channels, the revenue model unfortunately will remain, the advertisement will remain, and that will guide, unfortunately, the content delivery and editorial. Thank you.
Who do you follow on YouTube?
Sorry?
Who do you follow on YouTube?
I follow News 9 Plus OTT where I work. Thank you.
It's a plug. Ma'am,
No, I'm good. I'm just saying that at the end
who
of
do
the
you
day, coming
follow?
back to
Who do you follow on
No, I
YouTube?
follow multiple people. And I follow, again, I work with CNBC. I was with NDTV for 14 years. But I follow multiple channels. And I, again, feel that it's a great place. Journalism can always survive and thrive. But I do feel there is a little bit of a distinction to be made between each and every content creator and a seasoned journalist. So that's what I feel.
Mr. Khan, who do you follow on YouTube?
Well,
Same question.
I don't follow many YouTube news channels, but I follow a lot of other stuff on YouTube. I follow music channels. I follow channels of philosophy. A lot of things. But I would like to say one thing, that we, as responsible journalists, either trained or untrained, whatever, we are standing at the crossroads where we must decide whether we want to give our viewers the content which they are accustomed to liking, or should we as responsible journalists give them the content which we as responsible journalists should give.
Thank you very much. That's been a great conversation with all four of you. Please give them a round of applause. We are ending on a very positive note after hearing about graveyards and end of the story and bad news. And somebody also said journalists are like cockroaches. I just can't. One of the earlier speakers. I couldn't make sense out of that. Thank you very much.